Hey, what's up, viewer? Welcome back to this Nebulous live development creation series. As always, this series is for helping me focus and accomplishing my goals of completing this game. And I'm happy that you were able to make it to Day 18, Hour 3, if you did happen to make it to this. Alright, so in the last video, I was refactoring how stars are spawned with a nebula. Originally, every single nebula on load would instantiate each of its stars based off of a random generation. However, in the long run, there's probably going to be dozens and dozens of nebula throughout the galaxy. So the idea of having that many stars in the game at once is questionable. So instead I decided to do a refactoring where I am object pooling these stars, and anytime I enter a selected nebula, that nebula simply takes the queue of objects, of GameObject stars, and basically uses its own internal data to build the stars at that point. So it accomplishes an actual object pooling system, which is going to help quite a bit for efficiency in the long run. I did consider, though, that there's one issue with that, which is that now that the objects aren't actually in space, my internebula scanning idea is going to have to be more complicated because the physical object doesn't just exist now in space. Instead, the scanner is going to have to essentially take the... It's basically, I'm going to have to create a system for it to essentially know when the scanner is getting close to something it will scan, and then reporting that scan once it hits, but I think that will work alright. We'll have to see, though, as we expand the system. Okay. So, the last time I was in here, I was trying to get the queue to work properly, and what I'm figuring out is that I'm going to just have to go like this. And initialize a new queue, and then say for... I'll just say 32 at this point, but I think 32 makes sense. More than 32 stars in the nebula, I don't know about that, so we'll have to see. So for now, we're going to have this queue. We might be able to jack it down to 16 or 8 stars, we'll see. But essentially, all I have to do here is say Nebula Star Pool in queue, and we're just enqueuing a new game object. Although I'm actually considering this off the top of my head, and I'm wondering if this is going to work, because it's going to generate a completely blank game object, but when I go down here, the position and scale change, but it doesn't have, it's not the start prefab. So what I really need is a queue of the prefab 32 times, basically. So let me see here. Does star data have the prefab? No. I need to, let's see here. How did I do this? Qt data. I can't remember off the top of my head, so let's just switch back over to the code, or to the editor, and take a look at the player data and see where I linked it. So maybe it was just in nebula spawning. Okay, good. So I need nebula spawning data. I need I'm going to actually need this here. I need to get its nebula spawning data component, and then grab the star prefab, and then I need to, I'm not sure exactly how this, let's see, I think I can say new game object and then pass in a game object. Or maybe I can't do that actually, hold on. I think maybe all I can do is give it a name. Let me see here. I can give it a components type. Do I have to instantiate it technically? I think I do have to do that. So let's see here. So yeah, GameObject star prefab. And then we'll just say GameObject star like this. And then we'll come down here and say star equals instantiate star prefab. And then we will enqueue the star. And this should in fact basically add 32 star prefabs to the, or 32 separate instances of the star prefab to the queue for use in the functions. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Alright, so it's interplay mode, and give it a second to load and compile. That is one thing about ECS that's pretty nifty, is that it's like an instant load. It doesn't actually have to, or it doesn't sit there and think that long. It actually does instant load basically. So okay, so I screwed up the parenting here. Active nebula, yes, the transform. Oh, no, so let's see here. So star dot parent, star dot transform dot set parent as transform, and then world position stays. Okay, so now they should parent. Although, now that I think about it, by default, they also need to be disabled by default. Alright, so let's give it another shot. These stars should be parented. Or excuse me, the star instances in the pool should be parented, and they are. So if I check these nebula real quick, they do have random stars, except for the last one. So that's like an empty nebula, which is kind of strange. Okay, so the idea now is that if I click this and zoom in, I should get 4 stars, and they should be of all the correct proportions. And I do have 4 stars, and I in fact do have 4 separate stars now. And if I double check, let's see here. So like, this is a red giant. These two would be blue giants, and then the last one's a red dwarf. So I guess that's correct, yeah. So yeah, that's essentially correct. And if I zoom out, oh, it actually removed all of the active nebula instantiations. That's not correct. So if I select the other nebula and zoom in. Does it have the same 4 stars, or does it have different stars, different 4 stars? Okay, so it looks like this one has a different set of stars then. So like, oh. Okay. So I understand what I'm doing wrong here. I am, in fact, when I'm exit... Oh, wait, actually, let me double check. So I think what's happening is when I exit the nebula, it's just parenting... It's doing the parenting code when I exit the nebula. Okay, so let me see. They all have a couple stars, so if I select one and zoom in, it has them pooled. So there's a red supergiant and a white dwarf. With a kind of crappy interactability. It at least highlights, so I guess that's okay. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that. But okay, so the problem is that when I exit this, it transfers every single child to that nebula, which is not correct. So when I exit the nebula, I need to fix that problem. Which I think is just this. The galaxy object should be true by default. It should not be set to false in the first place. And it looks like I'm not even using that anymore anyway. So I'm actually going to scrap that. And then it should be working now. And one thing I just remembered is for some reason I'm messing this up. I think it just has to do with the fact that I'm not supplying a planet at start, basically. I think that's essentially what's going on. Okay, so let's see here. So 1 star. Man, it would just be cool if the edge was dark. So I'm not sure how I'm going to mess with that, but it would be cool if the edge was dark to signify some selection. Oh well. So for now though, okay, so zoom out. It deactivates the star. It still has this star, but if I go to a new star, let's see if that's accurate. 1 star, 1 star. Okay, yeah, just so. It basically just grabs a new star, which is kind of interesting because if I move out of this and then move back into this nebula, it's going to basically make the exact same star here and here. But that's just part of how pooling works, I suppose. But that's essentially just what it's going to do. It's going to just assign values every time to the pool, basically. I can make it even more efficient where it queues. I could make it even, there's actually a way to make it even more efficient now that I'm thinking about it. Basically, every time a nebula passes in the values, all I have to do is in queue for that number. And then it doesn't have to make 32. And if it ever goes up by like 1 or 2, it'll just add them. So that's something I could consider in the long run. However, giving a 32 by default means that all 32 of these will be like assigned into memory at the same time, and it won't space them out as much. So the actual math in the code will go faster technically, but I guess I'll have to consider that in the long run. Okay, so, but So now this is basically working. Alright, so the next step in this process is going to be, I've got two options. One is to, upon selection, whoops. So upon selecting a star, set it up to actually transition into the star. The other option, which I think is what I'm going to do, is I need to set it up so that when I like enter the nebula, it effectively gives me a UI element over this, or underneath it. That way, if the star is tiny, 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 there's still a solid screen space element that I can select on. And if I select it, the idea is that it can like do a zoom assist, and then from here it would even possibly have the info of it in here, and it could be zoomed in even further or whatever, you know. And the idea is from here, then the player could actually go into the system without changing how the star looks, basically. Man, okay, so that's a tough choice because it shouldn't be that difficult. Let me give it a shot. Okay, so I'm going to give that a shot. I'm going to try, and I'm not exactly sure how to do this, but I need to effectively access my UI document, and I very simply need to add a completely separate element Alright, so let's see here. Do I have a UI? I do have all this going on in here. Trying to consider how to organize this. Okay, so to be a like a label that is a button. So effectively, I guess it's just a button, or it doesn't even have to be a button. I mean, yeah, I guess it is a button. Or I guess I could feasibly click the UI element to select it, and I could avoid for the most part, I could avoid having to like manually move the camera to select it. It would be convenient. Be selectable by elements, so I'm debating on where to place this, but I think if I place it in, let's just put it anyway. I'm just going to call it a star panel. Or should I call it star panels? Or this is also something that Active Nebula might handle. Okay, so let's just call it star panels for now. Whoops, I accidentally made a destruct. My bad. taking too long, so let's just go up here and do it ourselves. Alright, and now we're looking at... Okay, so we have to essentially on start... The first thing I need to test is if I can even make one. And now that I'm imagining it, essentially these panels have to get created anytime the, like, essentially whenever the active nebula is more or less, whenever the star is generated, there also has to be some calculation for placing this star panel. Which is giving me the idea that more or less I should just add it in here. Alright, so I'm going to need the UI document, root UI. This is using Unity elements, or UI elements. And then I'm going to come down here and say, like, root UI equals... And usually what I do is I just do a direct reference on this. And maybe it's this. I guess it's called, so it's called UI document. And then I have to, like, get component UI document. And okay, so I'm just forgetting a little bit how I'm doing this. So I'm just going to real quick jump into a different UI thing to double check, because I'm kind of brain farting on it. I know I need to grab the root element and then, like, make smaller elements. Let me see here. Okay, so yeah, just root visual element. Alright, so let's see here. Visual element root, and that's just going to be root UI root visual element. Then from here I've got to I'm trying to consider this. Will build stars have to, I'm kind of considering having like a visual element array for star panels, basically. Something like this. there's effectively so effectively we're pooling these UI elements as well. Alright, so the next thing I need to do is say like root, and I need to like add a visual element. So I'm going to need visual element. I'll just call it start panel. And in fact, I was actually going to make it a button, so like, I may be able to just say button. Start panel button. Or I guess I could just call it start panel. If I'm going to make a new button here, it's going to be so I can actually give it a system action by default. Okay. And then start panel is, let me see, style? Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is the tricky part because I basically have to set, let's see here. So I need to set it to an absolute position. And I'm forgetting how to do that. So let me open up the So let me whip open the UI builder real fast and select an element, and let me see what it was called over here. Okay, so I'm trying to set its position to absolute. I do not, in fact, want to have it be relative because I'm just going to be completely manually positioning it. So that's your position dot the value. Position dot absolute. Okay. It's kind of cool how that works like that. Although this is tripping for some reason here. Okay, so I'm screwing this up a little bit. What about this? Okay. So this will allow the panel to not be repositioned based on other elements inside of the root visual element. So now that that is done, there's something else I'm going to need here, which is like float screen X and float screen Y, which I am I used to understand. Let's see, is there a okay, so it's just width and height. So I grab the screen width. I have the screen height. And then now I actually have to do something else, which is and I'm wondering if I should do this as a player data. Okay, so the easy thing would be to come down here and I do have a UI data. I don't think I'm using it anything though, am I? I am using it on UI data. I'm not sure that if I'm actually using that on anything though. Okay, so I'm getting hung up on if I should call it UI data or split. I should probably split it up into different components, to be honest with you. So real quick, I'm going to remove this component and delete this script and see if it's getting used anywhere. And it is getting used in player click selection button. So look at that, it's getting used in the most important, or it's getting used like the most prominent script in the whole thing. So let me see if I can bring that back or not. Okay, so no I can't. So I'm gonna have to, well actually, this is kind of what I want to do because I want to split up these values anyway. It's just such a ghastly name for the script is all. So we've got like players active selection UI data. Not great, but I suppose it's gonna work. And then I have to go into the active selection script that's screwing up, and I need to figure out here where it's screwing up. And I'm essentially replacing this with a few things. So is mouse over UI element and inactive element opacity. Wait a minute. Oh, so that means I'm going to have to fix something else somewhere else. I'm rather sure. Okay, so we have inactive element opacity, so let's just drag this over here. So what? Public float inactive element opacity. And I did have a range on it, I'm pretty sure. Something like this, and then the other one was is mouse over UI element. Alright, and so now I can come up here and just swap this to say and actually needed to say player active selection UI data and scrap the UI data object like this, and then GameObject UI data equals GameObject find UI data. In the long term, if it's more efficient, I'll add tags or something. But for now, I'm just going to do it like this. So then I've got to actually grab the player's active selection UI data and equivalent it to UI data get component player's active selection UI data. Okay. We'll scrap this, and then basically these two just have to be replaced. Oh, wait, hold on. He's already screwed up something here. Oh. Okay. So that should fix itself up pretty good. This is one heck of a script here. I didn't even have to peek at a header right there. Okay. So this is going to yield the other place where this was getting used, which was right here. And we're just going to do the same thing. So it's player's active selection UI data. Whoops. And then we just have to just replace these. All right. That should fix the compilation issues. And once I add the component, oh, did I? Okay. All right. So jump on UI data and really quickly. I think I can add like, I'm not sure how many tags I can add, but it's basically just going to come down to efficiency. So let's see here. If I'm at, okay, so UI data, and I need to slap the player's active selection UI data on here. And then this was 0.65. And active element opacity. Okay, so I'm interplay mode. More or less, this should stay the same. It should stay this tint. And then if I open up the window here, this tint is still here correctly. This isn't correct with these are interactable, but that's okay, I suppose. And we're actually seeing that it is accurately switching this bool whenever I'm over UI elements. That's still correct. Okay, good. All right, so I did all of that just so I could more efficiently determine the panel size for a UI element. So let me see here. Where was I actually? And I actually don't need this anymore because I am doing that completely differently now. Alright, sorry about that. I'm just brain farting a little bit. Where the heck did I put that anyway? So we had... Or had I just not chosen it yet? Man, I'm having a brain fart and a half right now. Okay. So essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to set up a global value for modifying how large the UI element is, and to do that I've got to generate a component that will... I'm just going to put this component under the UI. And in fact, I am going to make a directory called UI data for this particular subset of values. Then I can jump into this data and just create a new one. Once it decides to compile all the way. And I'm simply going to generate a mono behavior called Nebula Star Panel UI data. It's pretty narrow. And we are going to have some pretty straightforward values. So we've got public, float, say x ratio, and we're also going to make this a range from 0 to 1, so that way, if feasibly, it's just going to pick 0% of the screen width or 100% of the screen width. It has to be between there. Same thing, but we're going to call it y ratio. So this is going to allow us to hard code the dimensions of how big these actual elements are. So now that I've set this up, I'm going to have to add this as another variable. So Nebula Star Panel UI data and we will grab it down here. So Nebula Star Panel UI data equals, and this is coming from the UI data, which I have not actually found yet in this particular rendition. Alright, so the idea here then is whatever the screen X and screen Y position is, that is in fact how large the panel should be. Oh, but you know what? I just realized that that means that that's not going to be exactly correct because the panel has to display itself at different sizes of the screen. Or no, the screen, yeah, the panel can't just be the same size if the player is zooming around. Or, I guess maybe that's actually kind of the point, isn't it? Okay, so let's just try this anyway, then let's see what happens. So I basically have to come into the start panel, style, and then I can't remember exactly what the dimensions are, but is value a vector or something? No, it's just doing that again. Okay, so I'm just going to have to dive into the UI builder and take a look here. There's in fact 2 separate values, I'm pretty sure. Part of the problem here is I feel like I'm going to have to do a conversion into screen space from like the game space or something like that. So let's see here. So display position, it does have the left top, right bottom values. All right, so let's see here, to practice this on the first shot, we're going to have to say that it's not letting me actually do that. It's a little strange. Okay, so let's see, your style dot left. It just has the raw left value. Okay. So where? Oh, and I guess I can jink this into the data while I'm at it, just for testing's sake. So let's see. Public float x start and public float y start. Real quick. I think it's bottom. Would be y start. Oh, it's actually giving me trouble here. So I'm doing this incorrectly somehow for some reason. What kind of value is it expecting? What did they call it here? I called it a style length. And like, what, can I go like this or something? Yes, I guess so. So what did I call this? Y start, but it's UI Nebula Star Panel UI data dot x start. Okay. That's a little convoluted, but whatever. And then to the same degree, more or less, it's so star panel style top equals new style length Nebula Star Panel UI data dot, this is going to be a Y ratio. So I'll copy this and I'll put that one below this one, and then just change this to X and then change this to right. Okay. So this is going to generate a panel at the position that I decide for it. So then I have to say root.add, and I'm just adding the star panel, basically. Alright, so let's see if this works or not. So UI data, I need to actually add the Nebula Star Panel UI data. Just put it at like 10% for now. And then for the starting value, let's just pick like 100 and 100. And let's see what happens. So I should get a button up here. And I do in fact get a button, but it's ginormous. And I'm not sure why I'm trying to think about it. It's also not considering it a UI. Oh, it is considering it. Oh, no, it's not. It's a little strange. Alright, so there's a good shot I'm just messing up this part here. Oh, you know what I did wrong? I didn't multiply the screen size by the ratio. Oh, whoops. Alright, so that's gonna make it look a little different. However, there's a good shot that my idea for using the ratios is incorrect because it's gonna like on zoom out. Well, I guess on zoom out I can just deactivate them. Okay, so I'm getting a button, but it is way off. It should just be like 10% of this. It shouldn't be this humongous. Again, now it just like disappeared completely. Alright, so I'm screwing up something. Maybe I'm screwing up top and bottom. I don't think so though, because the right's also way too big. Yes, it's still screwed up. Alrighty, so I Okay, so I see why. It's starting in the right spot, but it's extending. Okay, so it's actually the values are from its container. Which means if I come in here and I say 1 minus, I should in fact get a more sensible value out here where it's 10% of the screen size. So it should be an actual square. Or no, it's not going to be an actual square because it's a rectangle screen, but I think this will make a more sensible shape. So sensible it doesn't even exist. Alright, so that's weird. Oh, you know what I did wrong? Order of operations. My bad, I forgot that. The one time I don't consider it and it changes on me, okay. So now it should work better. Okay, but it's still not showing up here. Oh, it's showing up way down here. Okay, so the size is sensible. Oh, it looks like it's starting from the bottom up. So it's like, make this like 444, 555. And now it's like weirdly right here. That's really weird because it, yeah, I'm just not doing this correctly. The, like, it has to do with how it's not actually just calculating the starting position width and height of the box. It is hard coding this value, which is changing depending on where its starting position is at. So I've got to rework that. Alright, so I guess that's going to be something for the next video. I sorted out a small bug with the active nebula and with how it pulls the data, and I showed that the pooling is actually working. So then I moved on to a new type of thing that I'm not used to, which is generating UI elements from scratch in code, not using the UI builder. So I've got to sort out a few kinks with doing that, but the idea is that when the player zooms in to this nebula, there will be basically one of these things, like underneath each star, regardless of how big the star is. That way if the star is tiny, but it's still there, the player can still select the star. Because it was having trouble raycasting correctly. And that'll just be some convenience for the players so they don't have to like zoom in and pan to like figure out where their star is, essentially. And that will open up some solid transitions. Because I'm considering removing the flat zoom and instead adding some zooming tiers. So the player can like zoom out a tier to get like the maximal view of the nebula. But then they can like zoom in to like a halfway point where then they can pan between like 4 quadrants of the nebula maybe, and then like the last step would be zooming in pretty close to one star. The next step being selecting the star and actually moving into the system. So that's all stuff I've got to work on in the next video. Oops, sorry, it sounded like my mic paused for a second. Alright, so I appreciate if you've watched the video up to this point, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.